comes down in those governance challenges. So let's dive right in. Chapter challenges. Leader. Suffer from a dysfunctional leader. Does that sound like you? At your organizations, at your chapters, I'm going to guess that some of your chapters are larger. Maybe they're state associations or sections or large districts that have a local team that are staffed because they have so many members there. Right? We see some state associations that are larger than the national association. And then we see the other end of the spectrum where they have volunteers that have 38 members. They are working at nights and weekends in their quote-unquote free time. But overall, they suffer from dysfunctional leadership at the local level. And then we run into a lot of associations that suffer from dysfunctional leadership at their HQ. How don't they get it, right? Let me know if that sounds like you. Misalignment. So volunteer, staff, and board misalignment. Objectives that are being passed along by the board aren't being shared, or they're being met with resistance by the local leaders. And that dives right into that national opposition. Most of the associations with chapters that we meet, the locals have some level of autonomy, and even if they don't, there's an active opposition. It's kind of like national is their big brother, and it's hard to get everybody swimming in the same direction. Burnout. We've met some really great volunteers at the local level that just get burnt out. They got involved in their industry and they didn't want to be doing a lot of the work that they're doing as a volunteer because it's just not attractive to them. So how are you taking that and scaling that? How are you automating those processes? It's not their fault, it's yours. You need to understand that. And when you do, it gives you a power and freedom to change things. And then recruitment. Inability to recruit new members or new volunteers, or better yet, inability to recruit good members and good volunteers. And there absolutely is a difference. I love this slide. So changing over to staffing challenges. Sometimes I see our clients, I know they got that face on right there, a little unicorn, screaming, ah. So we talked a little bit about earlier, and again, this is referencing the Mariner chapter benchmarking study that came out just this year. 3.3. And gosh, I even think this was a little high. 3.3 is the number on average of full-time HQ employees dedicated to their chapters. If everyone can pull up the chat real quick, I'd love to find out if that's high or low. How many people in your organization at HQ, on staff and paid, are dedicated? They have a role that has, even if it's like someone's part membership, part chapters maybe. How many people at your organization are dedicated to chapters? We got Christy saying 1 full-time, 2 half-time. John said 1. We had 2 Jessicas. One says, that's a high number for us. In my org, it's only about me and about 1/3 of my time, exactly. Another Jessica says, just in big capital letters, me. Cindy says 3. Michael, 5 full-time. Okay, good. All right. Now, I want you to just think about this, because maybe this isn't something you track right now, is the second number, 65%. So on average, 65%, this study found, of chapters had volunteer leadership. So how many, out of all your components, how many are volunteers, and versus how many actually have paid staff at the local level? All right, good. All right, so Eugene's back, my main man, with a nice little pearly white smile here. You'll kind of find that our culture is, we love working with nonprofits because we like to have a little bit of fun and keep things a little light. So Eugene Unicorn, let's go through a little story. So Eugene is a CRP, he's a component relations professional at the Federation, the FMC, the Federation of Mythical Creatures. So the FMC sees a high turnover rate due to several different things, right? So you might have, we just talked to a really good association that had demographic changes, right? So their membership for some reason back in the day was in a lot of rural areas, and now it's a lot in urban. That could be because a lot of younger people moving in the urban areas. It's been hard to get new volunteers and keep them engaged. They don't want to do the type of menial operational work. So what's the result? Some chapters have become unresponsive. So I see a couple of people I've talked to in this webinar before that I know this answer is yes. How many of you are waiting on something that the chapters owe you right now? How many of you right now, type into the chat, how many of you are waiting on something, whether that's data, whether that's money, whether that's some kind of other information, whether that's engagement, whether that's they were supposed to take some kind of education or webinar from national training. How many of you are waiting on locals? We're getting a lot of people that are putting a lot of exclamation marks in capital letters saying yes. Cindy, I am. Anna, data and annual reporting. Kristen, annual financial reporting. Michael, always, constantly. Patrick, yes, an exclamation mark. Jessica, yeah. You're constantly waiting for them, okay? We're gonna unpack that a little bit and understand what we've seen to improve that, okay? So they don't have to do that anymore. So you don't have to wait anymore, spend all that time. And lastly, the result, right, is inconsistent and lack of transition to new volunteers, but it's also a huge gap for you at HQ. How can you do anything if you don't even have all the data? How are you going to, it's like a psychological warfare. How am I going to roll something out to improve things if I can't even get them to give me my financial reporting? Or I know one of you in this webinar is waiting on taxes still from the beginning of the year. Your chapter still haven't given to you and it's October. We're gonna improve that. That's an obstacle we're gonna overcome. So here's Eugene again talking about communication issues and these challenges and obstacles that exist. Alignment. 30% in the study we've referenced. 30% of associations indicated that their chapters are somewhat or rarely aligned. Somewhat or rarely aligned. You don't have to put this one in the chat if you don't want to, but I want you to think through. Gosh, I can name 6 chapters right now, 6 state associations that are not aligned with the strategic objectives. I just attended a meeting where we're either creating our next several years rollout of strategic objectives, or maybe you're reviewing the current ones, and you're sitting in that meeting knowing that you can name people's names at the local level that aren't aligned, right? So all this work you're doing in HQ and your locals aren't even aligned. So here's, I think we've been talking a lot about obstacles and things like that, and here's where we're going to start transitioning a little bit into some tools and just some exercises I want you all to think through. Cadence. This is probably one of the biggest opportunities to either create or improve on at your organization in relation to your chapters. So do you have regular communication with chapters? And is it consistent in terms of timing? So if you have a newsletter that goes out once a month to update them on new initiatives and things like that, is it going out on the same day of the month? Are you doing a bi-weekly webinar to help provide more tools and education to your volunteers? Do you have some kind of check-in calls where people can just call in and it's just open mic hour for questions? Do you have a regular cadence? Do you have portals or knowledge bases for volunteers and local leaders to get information? We were in DC last week talking to a great association that she was explaining to me this new portal they're launching on their website at National that has addressed a ton of issues and concerns and FAQs for the locals, and also has some really great worksheets for exercises for assessments for the National to engage with their local components. So someone's got a question, they got a section for it. And I want you to ask yourself, do you have that portal or knowledge base? Are there set expectations for volunteers? And do you have a process for volunteer transition training? Do you have an LMS set up? When someone comes on, it's just an automated onboarding. Do you have a drip campaign when someone signs up to be a treasurer at a new chapter? Do you have emails going out to them over a few weeks that are the same, that teach them what it means, right? Do you have that volunteer transition? And then quality control. Are your chapters just hitting quota, number of events, or do they consistently deliver the professional experience members need and most importantly expect? So how does all this stand in the way of ROI? Well, let's have a chat with Eunice here, who is Eugene's colleague at the FMC, the Federation of Mythical Creatures. And Eunice is the new Director of Membership Services. So real quick, if everybody can in the chat, because this is really important, what's your title? Are you the Director of Chapters Relations? Are you a Marketing Associate? Are you a Director of Membership Services? What is your title? Okay, good. Section Support Specialist, good. Section relationship manager, good. Director of membership, associate, good, good, good. So units here, we talked about it. It starts and ends with membership. That's why we have chapters. In the past, members received different messages and had different onboarding experiences, plus they didn't have a place online to renew their membership. I don't know if you're a Starbucks drinker or a coffee drinker, but one of the attributes or one of the reasons that Starbucks is so successful, or what they attribute it to, is their consistency. So if I go to New York or DC, or I'm going to be in Baltimore for the IMUS conference next week, and then going to Newark to meet some clients, I can go to a Starbucks, and the reason I choose Starbucks and will pay a little bit more is because I get a consistent product that I enjoy. Now, they have their local flavors. I went to Lexington, Kentucky the other day, and they had their mint julep mocha. We're in Detroit, and we got our Motor City brew. But the consistency of the product is the same. How many of you right now know that one of your biggest problems is that members there's no consistency? Your Dallas chapter is incredible, and they go above and beyond, but for some reason your Connecticut chapter, it's like they do the bare minimum. How many of you have that issue? Everyone's coming and saying it's a huge concern. Absolutely. The result, value prop gets lost in translation. It's like a game of telephone from national to chapters. You constantly have chapters that are on your needs to go to the principal office list, and they feel that too. And then you even feel a little guilty because they're volunteers, right? And you need to often fire volunteers if they're not providing the value you need. And then members find it too hard to renew, buy products, or register for events, so they stop trying. So I'm not pointing fingers, but I'm going to get on a soapbox real quick. We see some associations embrace this, and it's incredible. If it's hard to sign up or apply for membership or buy a product or non-dues revenue type service at your organization, I want you to know it's a big problem. Now, I'm not saying that's in your control. That might be marketing's job, that might be your IT and web development, whoever's it is. I just want you to know something. If it's a huge process to apply, that's a problem. If you, there's some really great examples out there where you can capture someone's name, email, phone number maybe, and payment information. And then step two, after you already had them submit that, step two then is to fill out this application. Okay? So if you're not creating those processes, you're losing out on revenue. I guarantee it. That's maybe if everyone's got a lot of desire to learn more about that, maybe we can do a whole other webinar about that. Governance changes. So you got Eunice here screaming out, we're going to go over a couple things for governance changes. Now, governance changes are usually very unique to each association, okay? So share with me through this what you're thinking. Governance challenges, I'm sorry, not changes, governance challenges. What are your chapter's responsibility as written per your bylaws? What are your chapter responsibilities as written per your bylaws? That's always a challenge. Risk management. As a governance, you're always looking at risk and measuring risk and challenging risk. You want to roll stuff out and people are calling it too risky. Risk management inside your organization. All of these challenges create a limited effectiveness. I know I've talked to several of you in this webinar alone that have told me to my face that I can't be as effective, Kyle, because I can't get them to adopt what we roll out. Okay, we're going to go over some ways that you can do that, and we're going to show you real life examples, right? Go back to that Dresden example. But limited effectiveness because of these governance challenges. I think it was Don who said political. How many feel like your day is so political and national and or to your local components? How many of you have a board structure or an advisory structure that makes decisions that are comprised of presidents of local components, for example? Right? So even if you want to get something done, the bylaws state that you got to get buy-in from them, or maybe it's not even the bylaws, it's just the structure. Chapters won't move unless that board says yes. Jessica shared, management board, not advisory, they all have to run the business in their area. Yeah, and it can create incredible complexity, right, Jessica? And then lastly, from a governance challenge, this is more of a result, is uniqueness between chapters. okay? Uniqueness between chapters. And Patrick just said something as I said that relates to this. He said, even if our board says yes, there is little adoption, and that's a lot of reason, or a lot of our cause comes from each chapter has a level of uniqueness. How many of you, just in your head, raise your hand or just type into the chat, because I feel like this is a little bit of a therapy session we've turned this into, which is great, is your chapters are on different technology processes. Maybe they have their own accounting software. Maybe they have their own AMS. Maybe some have an AMS and some are running it off of Excel spreadsheets and back of the envelope math and writing down their membership numbers in a notebook. How many have different processes? How many have different membership types? How many have different dues structures? We're getting a lot of yeses right now. Absolutely. So the uniqueness from between your chapters is caused by a lot of that governance challenges. We're going to teach you how to get them on the same page, and it's not overnight, it's over time. All right, so we just talked about all those challenges, and now we're going to talk about what drives ROI. So read the 4 up here that we've identified as top 4 concepts and key items to pay attention to, but type in any others that you have as well, okay? So membership, retention, and renewals. If you got holes in your bucket, it doesn't matter how fast you fill it, because you can't maintain a good growth rate if you're losing a lot. So if you're below 80% retention, it is darn hard to grow. And I'd love to learn everyone's numbers. If you do have retention below 80% and you are growing, please let me know, because I'd love to learn more, because that's super hard to do. So first, if we can't grow until we retain, event upselling, new memberships, obviously, and then non-dues product sales revenues, okay? And this is an evolution. So what should you member? That study from Mariner that we talked about, these were the top 3 things that chapter-based associations measured ROI on. And it's not per chapter, but it's membership, right? Is 41% measured membership retention, 40% measured member recruitment, so new members, and then 27% measured event participation. Are there any other key ones that you're measuring that you find very useful at your association? Type that into the chat for me. This is great engagement, everybody. This is awesome. I got another question for you that's very important. So as you're done thinking about that one, and Jessica just said trade industry partnerships are increasing, sponsorship dollars are increasing. Absolutely, that's another really great one. And that you know, I think sponsorship and all that in product, we could look at non-dues product revenue as well, or sponsorship revenue, and measuring the increases in that. But I want you to answer this question for me. How many of you have some kind of system in place, whether it's Excel spreadsheet or you have it in your AMS or Salesforce or something, where you have a list of your chapters in a column, and then across the top in a column, and then across the top in columns, you have different things that you're measuring. How many of you can actually say, okay, here's our aggregate for membership retention, but here's the breakdown per chapter? How many of you have that? Because a lot of you, I know, have gaps in it because it's hard to get this data. But how many of you are at least trying to measure it? Awesome. Good, good, good. We see a lot of you are already down that path, which is step 1. Awesome, Eileen. That's good. That's good. All right. So here is the beauty of it, that when done right, and I think what we believe at Bill Highway and what we want to share with you and what we've been doing for 16 years, almost 17, is when done right, the chapter experience can be one of the biggest drivers of member retention. I want you to repeat that. I want you to write that down and tape it to your computer, because if you don't believe it, it'll never happen at the organization. When done right, the chapter experience can be one of the biggest drivers of member retention. Now, this is a quote. This is us saying this. This is Trevor Mitchell. So ARMA members named their chapter engagement as their top benefit on member satisfaction surveys. Flip that on its head for you real quick. ARMA members named their chapter engagement as their top benefit on member satisfaction surveys. Trevor went on to say, if we're investing in them, it increases our national retention rate and growth rate. If we are investing in them, it increases our national retention rate and growth rate. Now, I've talked to Trevor several times. He's a great guy. He's down in Texas. If you want to talk to him, I'm sure, connect with him on LinkedIn. and hopefully he's okay with me saying this, but connect with him and ask him. You know, one of the great things about being in the association space is we all want to help each other. You're not competing with him. So call Trevor and say, what did you do, man? Because they flipped it on its head and said, no, let's stop figuring out how, you know, let's stop asking ourselves the question, should we get rid of them? And let's start asking, how can we invest in them? What's the process of investing in them? Solve problems for our chapters and increase our national retention rate and growth rate. But Eugene asks, where do we start? And measuring and tracking ROI is impossible without data. Okay, so what we're talking about here are a lot of the case studies we got coming up. If you want to shoot us a message and talk more about you know, your current situation, and we can help you assess things you can do and resources you can use to improve it, let us know, because you're all at different stages, and I get that. But this right here, you need to believe is a mantra. But before we even get to that, you need to do assessment. So assessment starts with the data. All of your answers are in your data. Even if you don't have your data, the answers are still there, because that is one of the issues we need to solve first. So member retention equals ROI, 38%. Membership renewals, 38% of members cite lack of engagement with an association as the #1 reason for not renewing their membership. So how many of you, if you could type into the chat real quick, and maybe this is, I saw we had some membership people here, but maybe this is your counterpart, because you're not the membership team or marketing team. When's the last time that you did a survey to your members for the top reasons that they pay for membership dues? And what are your top 3 reasons? Type those into the chat for me real quick. What are the top 3 reasons? Because again, it starts and ends with members. I know we're talking about chapters, but it starts and ends with members. What are the top 3 reasons that they are members of your organization? Why do they pay you? So we're talking about membership retention. It starts there, okay, because that's how we start engaging with the chapters about improving that. What are the renewal rates? How many of you track engagement rates? So it seems like we got a lot of people tracking renewal rates. How many are tracking engagement rates? When's the last time that they attended a webinar or went to an event? And then are you correlating engagement to retention? You know, Facebook's famous for saying that they boiled all the things that Facebook did. They boiled down their growth to one thing. Does anyone know what that one thing is that Facebook cites? What Facebook boiled it down to is if a member joined, and within X amount of days, if Facebook's process got them to add 7 friends or more, the retention rate was off the charts. Off the charts. If they didn't, it was dramatically lower. So I'll repeat that. When you signed up for Facebook, if they got you to connect with 7 or more friends within, I forgot how many days it was, maybe let's just call it 24 or 48 hours, the retention rate was off the charts. Okay, now in hindsight that seems pretty logical, but when they have all of this data, they didn't know what to, you know, so often we measure too much and then we don't see what's important. But are you measuring your engagement rates? If one of the high value props, and this isn't for everybody, but one of your high value props that members say, I love the engagement, I love networking, that's why I'm a member, and I see a ton of people saying networking, then are you, in education even, because that's an engagement event, are you measuring engagement events or how much they engage versus retention? Do you benchmark that? And then you say, why does this chapter have terrible retention? And then you check their engagement rates, right? So let me know how many of you are measuring that. Obviously that comes down to what data do you have to support this? What's your quality of your chapter data? So again, we talk about, it starts with data, and your question or answer might be, I don't have data. I don't have the data I need. Well, then that's where we got to start, because we got to get it. And then I'm gonna take a pause here because I want this to sink in. And as a lot of you are still typing in some answers, I want you to write this down and highlight it. Is it a manual or automated process? And you might say, is what, Kyle? Well, is the process for chapters to pass data to national, is it manual or is it automated? Jessica, I love your exclamation mark. She goes, manual. Ah! Manual, manual, manual. Okay, I'm going to say this, and it's not your fault. All right, I'm not saying it's whoever, if you're in that position right now, but if you're having issues getting data and it's manual, it's your fault. It's not their fault, it's your fault. we see associations upgrade a simple process of how data is transferred. And that process alone not only adds a ton of clarity to the organization, but makes your job infinitely easier, okay? I'll say simpler, because your job's never easy. You guys really do have a hard job. But it's infinitely simpler. It's not complex anymore. Is simpler even a word? It's more simple, I don't know. But it's not complex anymore from the data standpoint. So if you learn one thing today, it's you need to learn that, or you need to concentrate and learn how to upgrade that manual process to an automated process. Whether that's dues collection, whether that's the way they're sharing information or uploading information, or if they're sending you an Excel spreadsheet, you got to understand that the onus, if it's on them for that kind of menial office back office work, it is you're making your life harder. It's not them, it's you. So you're really frustrated with the process at HQ. And again, I'm not saying you, Patrick. I'm saying this is probably something you inherited, right? Jessica and all of you, you've inherited this process. So I'm not blaming you, but you need to understand and accept that, because then we can figure out, once you accept it and we say that's the problem, then we can figure out ways to get past it, okay? And that's where we get into what are your plans for the future to get data. So as you guys are making your strategic plans, this needs to be a collaboration at HQ where you're telling a story, a compelling story, with other examples around the industry of how they improved it and what it did to their organization. And that's how we get to the ROI. Increase in renewals or maintaining a high percentage, need to measure accurate chapter member and financial data, which we talked about. All right. So let's get into conference and events equals ROI. So we're going to dive one more layer lower into the engagement we're talking about. And we're going to include education events in this as well, okay? All right, member engagement equals member value equals member retention. This also plays into member acquisition. We get a bunch of opportunities to sign people up. If you're like most associations, referrals are a big part of your membership growth. Events are an amazing place to really accelerate and provide tools to your members to go get other members, have them work for you. And then registration fees, but really this should be called non-dues revenue. 20%. 20% member attendance. So in one sector in the study we referenced, associations reported only about 20% of all members attended chapter-hosted events. What's your attendance rate across your chapters? Do you know? What is this number for you? Are you measuring that? That's the engagement number we're talking about. And maybe the engagement number can be broken down into how many just events do they attend. Maybe that's a webinar, maybe that's a in-person event. But I would measure ROI against each tactic, okay? I'm sorry, retention. Measure retention against each tactic. Because you might find that someone's coming to 6 webinars a year, but they barely retain. But if someone goes to 1 event a year, they're going to be a member for a decade, right? I'm seeing some people throw some numbers out here, but a lot of words like probably, 20% is a reality for us. I think it's this. So understand that that retention number or that engagement number is going to become one of your most important statistics to track. All right. Now, how can we do this? Here's an example we just did with a client. Their chapters, we formed a working group, and we're going to talk about this process in a second. They formed a working group. They understood the pains of their chapters, because we always talk about give a little, you got, or to get a little, you got to give a little, right? The give first mentality. We're going to provide solutions and solve problems for our chapters. And in return, what they wanted was to get the same event software out there to take advantage of economies of scale, so they're not all using different software and paying different, all these amounts and losing just money. But then also there was a clarity on data, and they could help analyze the data for the chapters. Now, if they would have proposed that at first, the chapters all resisted, and they did several times. But when we started with the chapters and said, what can we solve for you? And we built it into the story that helped them, because it truly does help them. All of a sudden, they all got on board and they adopted. And it was a beautiful, beautiful process. Now, that didn't happen in 2 months. It happened over a course of about 18 months. But now they have 90-some% of their chapters are using this. And I think it's like 97%. Okay? All right. So what are we talking about? We're talking about consolidating the process. Technology, tools, or standards provided by the parent. And I'm sure many of you have tried this before. Event turnout, incoming dollars, member experience, chapter spend on tools, There's a ton of benefits to the organization. We know that. That's logical. We know what national gets. But let's get intimate with what our chapters are saying and what their pain points are. And what's the ROI? Cost of tools are easy to measure. And then you, again, compare against the engagement and participation rates against ROI and retention. And measure that. If you're not measuring that, measure that. I think the new membership one is something that we all are looking at, right? And this is obviously equal to ROI. So sharing data is key. And we see often that there's a lot of gaps in data. But chapters and parents need to share this data regardless of level of affiliation. The question is, how do we do that? And then the ROI, number of chapters, number of members per chapter, and the cost of membership, understanding how majority of members are acquired. So know where they're coming from. If you don't know your referral sources or your marketing doesn't know the top acquisition sources, you need to, okay? Because that's going to play into different tactics that you're going to use with the chapters. And this also plays into product and service sales. So non-dues revenue. Standardizations can help. We just saw a beautiful rollout. Again, they formed a working group at headquarters that was comprised of different locals and different types of locals. The geography was different. Sizes had a diverse set. And one of the things that came out of it was their members all wanted to help with this certain type of education as it pertained to their career. And so a lot of chapters were trying something, all different levels of consistency. And what came out of the working group was a consistent product that National created with a technology partner and then rolled out to the chapters. But we started with the chapters, and that was their main priority, and now that's how they got that rolled out. Now here's the beauty of that. They rolled that out, and now there's a level of trust that started to get built, okay, between, you know, quote-unquote big brother, the National, the ones that are always trying to take our money or steal our data, or steal our members, or we're competing. And once they got one thing done, it was infinitely easier to do the next, okay? The first one's always the hardest. And if you've rolled stuff out and it didn't go well, Patrick, you mentioned earlier, it gets little adoption. That actually, it does. I know, it hurts you to try to get something else done, both in the buy-in from national headquarters to get the money for it, and for the locals. So, you know, there's a right way and a wrong way, or a good way and a bad way of doing things. If you think about, you know, I'm a Detroit Lions fan, unfortunately, and watching football, the Lions are the example of the wrong way to play a game. It's just what they do. But somehow the Patriots keep winning year over year, right? So that's why we keep sharing these examples to hopefully provide those examples for you of how to be the Patriots and not the Lions. Standardization can help. Too much variation makes ROI more complex. The standard fees for specific types of products and services, consistent processing, but you got to talk your chapters into it, or share why they should do that and help them understand. And a lot of that comes down to making a compelling story based off the data, starting small and proving it out to show a case study at the local level to share with the rest of the organization. We're talking about that strategy right now. So a really easy 4-step process that I've just referenced a couple times that I'd love to hear from everybody again in the chat, what your level of strategy has been, and has it been aligned to this. So first and foremost, you got to get HQ on board. You need to align to the strategic objectives. If you're not aligning to your HQ's or board strategic objectives, you're already hurting yourself, right? So you might know that the most important thing is event software, but you know what? It's just not in the stars right now, written in the stars, because that's not where your HQ is headed. So go with the flow, right, and try to figure out you know, what else you can do, starting with those chapters. But because you got to get HQ on board and you get buy-in. And again, and let me make this point. This gets easier as we find successes. Okay. Number 2, form a working group of locals. Now, I know right now you're sitting here and you can name the locals that you have great relationships with, the ones that you rarely hear from or hear from once in a while, and then the ones that if it wasn't a professional setting, you'd love to give them a piece of your mind. All right? I'm sure you all have the varying levels of that, okay? But what you need to do is form a diverse set of working group locals. So we have a client that we're implementing right now, and I'll give you this example. They have over 700 chapters. They are a federated model, okay? which means that there is a high level of autonomy at the local level. They all file their own taxes, for goodness sake, and have their own bank accounts. They had struggled for years. They're a huge organization, struggled for years to get things rolled out. What we did was form a working group, okay? And this is where you need to bring in, if you've ever heard of, there's a really great book called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. And one of the key concepts in there is the law of diffusion of innovation. And what it looks like is it looks like a hill, right? And on the left side, you have your early adopters and innovators, which makes up 18% of your population. And then you have your early majority and late majority, which makes up like 64 some percent. And then you have your late laggards. And the reason this is important is you need to fill your working group with some of your early adopters and innovators, the ones that you have a good relationship and are constantly asking for new and better things from National, that will try new things when you roll them out. But you also need a diverse set on the other side to make sure you're addressing all those issues. And here's why. When you do something and you roll something out, you roll it out with this working group as a pilot, and you identify a couple of associations, both small and large, in different geographical areas that have different problems. So you're making sure that your solution fits the whole organization. And when you do that, you work out the kinks with your early adopters before it goes to the rest of the population, because you don't want to lose momentum. But then you also build a case study. So when you communicate it to the rest of the organization, to the other chapters, you're talking about specific locals that have already done it, that have proven this out. So you got to position it where it's not National asking for it. You got to position it as where these locals wanted to do this, and this is helping, and this is why it's going to help you. Help you, Jan. So don't even talk about help your local. Help you, Jan, save time, save money, run better events, have less headaches, right? Not have to worry about sending this up to National anymore. Not have to worry about doing X, Y, Z. You got to quantify it, what's going to affect their personal life, okay? That is a key to success for that working group. You can't do that unless you start with them. Identify the chapter's pain. Identify what they want the most. In that example earlier I talked about, the local chapters wanted National to provide better event software. A lot of these locals, that wasn't their expertise, right? They don't know what's out on the web or researching what's out on the web, nor do they want to. They wanted National to provide something. Now that was an opportunity for National to get more insights into their own data at the local level that they didn't have, right? So that was National's benefit. And everyone saved money because now we're not all in different systems. So if you start with the chapters, and that worked for them, and I'm not saying it's going to work for you, and then we build a solution, right? You build a solution to solve that problem, and in that process, National's going to get more of what they need, okay? But you give a little to get a little. Give a little to get a little. We all know what you guys want, right? Or at least obviously you do. You know what HQ wants. But you got to give a little to get a little to those working groups. So looking at this, it seems pretty simple. I know it's a lot harder done than said, but the working group is an important part of success for these adoptions and rollouts. So if you've tried stuff before and you just send it out to people and see who's adopting, that's not the way to do it. I promise you. I'm not saying that it hasn't worked, right? The Lions have won some games. They just haven't won a lot. But if we could look at the way that you have a higher chance of success. Now we got a couple of questions here. Jessica's asking, would you say this equation works? Chapter engagement tactics against retention, and compare that to HQ engagement tactics and retention. That would give you chapter value in your org. Jessica, I will say more times than not, if you're measuring your engagement and your membership value that you've surveyed and your memberships put a high watermark on that type of networking or education, then 100% the engagement will translate to higher membership because that's what they want, okay? And then that will also, as National's helping provide different processes and ways to do that, you form a working group, roll it out with some locals, show that it works, and that's what Dresden did in that COSIN example, and then roll it out to the rest of the organization, okay? And then all of a sudden it becomes, you know, if a chapter's not doing it and they show up to the annual convention or biannual convention, whatever, the other locals start looking at them, whereas 2 years before they're like, no, we're not going to work with HQ. 2 years later you have a bunch of them going like, wow, this is awesome. Why aren't you doing it? And it tips. That's why that Malcolm Gladwell book's called a tipping point. You get it to tip, okay? If you just blast it out, you're doing yourself more harm than good because you're not getting it to tip. All right, so a few minutes left here, and I want to get to questions. Here's some rules of engagement for you, okay? Rules of engagement for you. Hindsight, these probably are pretty logical, and you're looking at them going like, no duh. But look at the stuff you're doing and make sure it matches to this. Number one, keep it simple. At that organization that we're working with, rolling out to 700 chapters, they had 11 things they wanted to do. 11. Did we start with 11? No, we started with 1. We started with the highest priority one because it'll be easy to do more later and even accelerate that pace, but you have to keep it simple. Know what matters. So there's uniqueness in every single association. That's why this whole idea of components in a better way out there is so hard, because there's so many different uniquenesses, okay? But you need to know what matters to your members and to your chapters and to your HQ. Again, we talked about all 3 levels. Surveying the members to know why they're members, forming working groups and surveying the chapters to understand what you can improve there, and then know where your strategic objectives at HQ are. Know what matters. From that, you should be able to decipher what your obstacles and challenges are. As from just this webinar and all the comments we're getting, the good news is this: you're all on the same page, okay? And I would say that we're all pretty smart people, and we can figure this out. And the good news is there's examples. So know what your obstacles and challenges are, and even break this down into what we call troublemakers. And I'm sure some of you are laughing right now saying, I can tell you who our troublemakers are at the chapter level and even in my national office. John constantly is a pain in my ass every time we have our monthly meeting, and he's being a hindrance to what we're trying to achieve. Know what those are. It's not always about getting rid of them, it's about just identifying them. Collect the data. You need to make sure that you are telling the story to the organization. And if you don't know how to do that, email us. We'd love to jump on a 30-minute phone call to give you other examples, learn your assessment, so we'll understand what your organization is doing, and we'll just share examples about how other organizations have done a better job of collecting the data. If you have the data or you have enough data, interpret the data. Data will tell you a story, okay? If you can illustrate and tell a story with your data to your HQ, chapters, members, whoever it is, interpreting that data, like maybe that should be your guys' title, data interpreter. Build visuals, tell the story through the data you're seeing. If you go and measure engagement, or the number of times a member engages versus the ROI or the retention or whatever, and you're able to translate that into ROI, you've just made your job so much easier for rolling something out. And then lastly, and I applaud you all for even showing up today because you're doing this, learn from other component relations professionals. Learn from others. You're not alone in this. There are a ton of case studies out there. That's why I think our problem, the reason we're doing these webinars is we've seen them all over the web, and there's some amazing resources, and we've referenced some here today, like Bob, like Peter and Peggy, like Cynthia Demore, but there's not one spot that it's all at. So we're aggregating all of it. We're going to be doing, co-hosted webinars by these people because we want you to learn from these other CRPs about what's out there and the different processes. All right, we're ending right on time, but please funnel in your questions here. What's up next? We're going to send you this, all of this, and we want you to come to our Tuesday, October 4th, Components as Drivers in Recruitment, Retention, Engagement webinar. This is by Dresden. I'm going to be with her. We're asking her questions about the COSIN process, what they did to increase membership by 38%. And everyone remembers what that retention was. It was 24%. Stronger chapters equals stronger associations is what she's communicating. And we got a few other associations through the month of October we're going to be doing with those as well. So we'll give you a chance to sign up for that. We'll also send out these additional resources, which is a ton, guys. There's so many really cool things that are out there. But that's it. AMA, ask me anything. Any more questions? Type into the chat if you're interested in what an assessment would look like. And we'd be happy to jump on the phone for 15, 30, 45 minutes, however long it takes, just to understand more about your model and the uniqueness of it, and then be able to give you different resources, either people to talk to, things to read, to address either the collection of data, to address the different systems that you want to roll out, to address the ways that you can get adoption, whatever it is. We've been doing it for 17 years. We'd love to give you an assessment for free, and and you can ask us anything, okay? Patrick, great seeing you, buddy. We'll talk to you soon. Jessica, awesome. We'll get with you after this and set something up. Patrick, or I'm sorry, Johnny, we will definitely set something up, my man. Okay, great. Yeah, we've got a lot of people that want it. Awesome. It's good to see. And then lastly, too, we're going to send out a survey, or you can just shoot us a note, tweet us, whatever it is. What are other topics that you want us to address? You want us to find data and research on? Or you want us to dive into deeper? I think one of them we saw here was this process of getting adoption. We can do a session just on that. We're here to educate you, so let us know. Tanya, no problem. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the engagement. Eileen, Don, Christy. Awesome. Great. Oh, you're too kind. No problem. No problem. Awesome. We'll send all this out. If there's no further questions today, please join us in a couple of weeks. Let us know what else we can do for you. I'd love to see emails coming in saying, hey, if you had a case study that could measure XYZ and other chapter-based associations, that would help my executive director make this decision. We have clients all the time say, hey, can you build out data for my CFO? Can you show him or her that this works? Because that's my biggest problem at getting budget to roll this thing out. Let us know what that looks like, or maybe you want us to jump a little bit deeper into your situation and then ask us those questions. Either way, we'd be more than happy to do that. I love how my marketing team had a couple of tiny unicorns kissing me here on the picture. Oh, it's too funny. Tanya, love people that love chapters. Amen, sister. We do too. I think one of the problems we have, Tanya, is we go to like these events and everything, and there's not something that's just for chapters, right? Or there's not something that's just for CRPs. There's a couple of sessions, but why not, like, let's make this thing all about chapters, because that's what's going to help you guys. There's so many topics that don't relate, you know, because you guys have unique problems. Jessica says, preach. I know it. I'm telling you. So just so you two know, we started off in the fraternal space with sororities and fraternities. And I was just at a lunch with 15 CEOs and executive directors yesterday in Indianapolis. And I talked to them about it, and I said, it's funny, you guys are forced to have chapters. Like, they know there was never a question of whether we should have chapters or not. And because of that, they've always just embraced it, right? And so they've always concentrating on proving it. And they are thriving in the fraternal space. The fraternal space has grown by leaps and bounds for many, many years because that's the only way of doing it. And so they found ways to operate in an effective way that help their chapters grow substantially, and then also grow their fundraising efforts and their philanthropic efforts and their mission efforts, obviously with dues and non-dues revenue. So we come to associations, and we heard this question when we got in association space 6 years ago, are chapters worth it? And to us, we're going, heck yeah, they are. You just got to do it right. And I think right is relative to your situation, but there is a better way, and there's help. Tanya and Jessica, I promise you, there's help, and there's people out there that are CRPs that I've been blown away in the association space how willing everyone is to help each other. Like when we called Dresden to do a webinar, her answer was hell yeah. It wasn't, oh, I don't have the time or anything like that. She's like, yeah, this is going to help people. I'm in. Let's do it. And then we called, we're going to be doing one with Chip from FEI. He's the CRP there at the end of the month in October. And they're so willing, and we want to share those examples with you. So lean on us, vent to us, and we're going to be happy to help you, okay? Jana, I would love to hear of an effective way to collect the data. So that's great. So Jenna, if you don't mind, I'll shoot you an email, and if we can understand the current issues that exist, and we'll just do a quick assessment, won't take long, we can tell you some of those ways. I shared a couple today, but there's a bunch more that you can do, and we'd be happy to do that, okay? Awesome, cool, yeah, we'll reach out. All right, any other questions? We still got a bunch of people in here. If not, we will send out an email with all these resources and everything, and we will hopefully see everybody in a couple of weeks, if we're not going to be talking to you before then, with Dresden and just talking about her scenario. She's got a ton of great tips and tricks and tools to use, so that one's going to be a much more hands-on one with her. Until then, again, this is I'm Kyle Bazzi here at Bill Highway. All of her information is listed, and we'll send that out as well. But we'll see you next time. Thanks.